Most games developed by From Software had at least some amount of horror material in them. Sometimes the horror came directly as the overall gameplay, like in Koan, or sometimes it came in the form of eldritch horror, like in Bloodborne, Shadow Tower, Echo Knight, Dark Souls. From Software always had a soft spot for horror, and except a handful of games in their library, From Software never really labels them as horror, but rather keeps the horror subtle, as something additional to be explored. The greatest example of this has got to be Bloodborne, of course. Starts as a Victorian Gothic beast hunting simulator. Halfway through the game, it turns into a Lovecraftian nightmare, riddled with some of the best eldritch horror designs ever seen. While not as heavy as Bloodborne, other Soulsborne games have their own share of horror elements too. Sometimes they are very subtle and spread far too thin, or sometimes they're on your face, scaring you in unimaginable ways. When Elden Ring was first announced and we saw the first glimpses of it, I was a bit nervous. Although I had full confidence in From Software, the involvement of George R.R. Martin and the fact that the game was going to be more traditional fantasy focused, I thought, this is it, this must be the game where they divert from horror, and I was okay with it, sure. But then I got over my ignorance and actually read George R.R. Martin to have more of an idea about his works and not limit myself to the Game of Thrones TV series, and glad I did because it's clear that he also puts some horror in his works in the same way, subtle, existential, and hidden in the details. Thankfully, Elden Ring turned out to be an incredible game. It won the Game of the Year title, well deserved, and it turned out to be a game with prominent horror elements. Hello everybody, my name is Urjan and welcome to this new horror visuals video. Today we're going to talk about Elden Ring, or rather the horror of Elden Ring. Where its horror comes from, how can we find it, what is it about, and what is it that makes it horror? Obviously these are some questions requiring detailed answers, and Elden Ring has such vast, detailed universe, so I decided to make this a two-part series, maybe even 3 or 4. I might not even get into its actual horror elements in this video as much as I want to, we'll see. This will also be the start of a new series I plan on going deep into, titled The Horror Of series. I will be going into games from other genres and look into their horror elements. It's one of my absolute favorite topics and I would be happy if you could join me on this journey. I'll tell which game I'm gonna make a video on next at the end of the video. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the first part of the horror of Elden Ring. Death. Although scary for many, it's a crucial part of the circle of life. Things are born, they live, and they die. It is the very essence of nature. It is what makes life so special. It is the end of all things, the abyss. The scary idea of we came from nothing and we will perish into nothing when we die. But imagine a world without death. Suddenly it's no more. Dying is somehow impossible. Things are born, they live, and now they cannot die. At first, this isn't such a bad idea, because why would someone want to die, right? They can now live forever and enjoy the riches of the world. But think about it a little bit more. What if someday you wake up and the world doesn't feel like what it used to be? You're not having as much fun anymore. This all feels meaningless. You don't like the way you look anymore. The earth is slowly melting away. There are wars, chaos, endless torment. The nature is dying. All sorts of problems. And you have to be there to witness all of this. Even when you die momentarily, you are reborn. And a small part of your soul, the thing that makes you who you are, erases a bit more with each death. Now you want to die. You desire the endless sleep. You want to plunge into the abyss. But alas, it's not possible. The idea in itself creates the first element, the first source of horror in Elden Ring. The inability to die and the frantic chaos it brings. When Queen Marika simply removed the rune of Destined Death and changed the very force of nature, this is what befell on the lands between. Death was no more, everyone under the grace of the Earth Tree was going to live in peace and harmony without worrying about death forever. But of course, things didn't quite turn out that way. Possibly the most important event in Elden Ring's timeline, the Night of the Black Knives, took place on a winter night and resulted in the death of the demigod Godwyn the Golden, Queen Marika's son. After this event, the Elden Ring shattered and the world plunged into chaos as Queen Marika disappeared without a trace. Without anyone to rule the throne, the lands between sunk into chaos day by day. War took place of peace, order was replaced with chaos. It's a never-ending battle of forces to determine the next ruler of the lands between. A stalemate. The lands between was forever stuck in this purgatory, until the Earth Tree called the Tarnished back to the lands between to end this stalemate. Chaos ate every inch of land, and amongst men who constantly fought each other, unimaginable terrors started to appear. Some came from Scarlet Rot, some came from underground, and some came from godly forces other than the greater will. Quickly coming back to the horror stemming from the idea of the inability to die, Elden Ring's existential horror starts showing its face here. It's very subtle and requires you to think a bit outside the box. The very idea of being stuck forever in this chaos, war, filth, and seeing the once beautiful lands between slowly sink deeper and deeper into this rot is possibly one of the worst kinds of existential horror. Every single thing loses its meaning. Your loved ones aren't who they used to be, and the only thing you can do is exist. Simply exist, mindlessly as an emotionless husk, wandering forever. It's a terrible horror on a very sentimental level. It's not on your face, but rather subtle. You have to look a bit deeper into it, on a philosophical level even. You gotta think about the meaning of that. It is why we value people. It is why we value our own lives. And once we lose that, what else do we have? Now, let's go back just a little bit and come to the Night of the Black Knives. I told you, Queen Marika removed the rune of Destined Death, preventing people from dying. So then, how did Godwyn the Golden die? Well, that's because the Black Knife assassins had used a dagger imbued with the rune of death. While the rune might be long gone as a force of nature, but it can still be used as a deadly weapon, in a literal sense. And that is indeed what happened. Godwyn's soul has died that day, while his body kept on living. He was the first of those who live in death. After his death, his body was buried deep in the roots of the Earth Tree to keep him close to its grace, even in death. His corpse slowly started corrupting the Earth Tree itself, creating the death root in the process. These roots were spread far and wide across the lands between, allowing those who died to rise in undeath, void from the Earth Tree's grace. When played, if you follow the traditional route and don't really stray too much from the main path, Godwyn the Golden's corpse is possibly the first horrifying thing you see in Elden Ring. When you're first in the Stormveil castle, fighting for your dear life, running away from things, avoiding unimaginable dangers, you come up to either one of the paths leading to Godwyn's corpse, deep within the castle. You either fall from the meters-long ladder while running away from your enemies, which I think happened to most people, or maybe climb down slowly, or hell, maybe you found the other way around and after fighting the boss or simply avoiding it, Godwyn's corpse slowly starts entering your view. It's not his whole body, but rather a small part of it. It is terrifying. Until this point in Elden Ring, you have seen some horrors and weird looking creatures, but you've seen nothing like this. Was it even alive? Is this a boss? What are you even looking at? You piece things together and find out that it is actually the once beautiful Godwyn the Golden's corrupted body. But it is far from what Godwyn used to look. Corrupted beyond recognition, Godwyn's body merges with the Earth Tree's roots and turns into this abomination. It is quite hard to explain what Godwyn turns into and why he turns into that. When encountered under the Stormveil castle, his body looks like a giant squid or some kind of other sea creature. It looks otherworldly, alien. It's almost like a scene from Bloodborne. Later in the game, when you're wandering between different areas in the underground section of the Lands Between, you go into the depths of the Earth Tree, quite literally called the Deep-Root Depths. Here you find the Prince of Death's throne. He is none other than Godwyn the Golden, standing lifelessly right across. The area is vast. It has to be a boss fight. It just has to be. But alas, it is a boss area, but you don't get to fight Godwyn the Golden himself. He just sits there, silently, lifelessly, his dead eyes gazing over you. An abomination, an unimaginable terror. Once beautiful, labeled golden, now turned into whatever otherworldly horror this is. Upon close observation, you can notice that his arms are still there and they're still in the same position as how the game showed when you catch a glimpse of the Knight of the Black Knives. The assassins would hold Godwyn in that same position with his arms open above his head. It appears that he died in that position and his body got forever stuck in that way. His lower body seems to have scales. When you look at it carefully, it even looks like a mermaid or some kind of a sea creature. When his other body part found under Stormveil Castle also looked like a sea creature, it is reasonable to think that he somehow turned into an aquatic creature when he died. But why? There is unfortunately no explanation for that. If you'd like to see his body in detail, there are several YouTube videos where people data mined and showed his body without all the clutter and special effects. He is indeed a mermaid or something very close to it. Whatever it is, Godwyn's lifeless, corrupted corpse is still there in both places and still stands to be one of the scariest things I've ever seen in Elden Ring. It's so unexpected, that's what makes it so scary. You're in this medieval type of castle, fighting these knights, avoiding these dangers, and then you find this. It's also so easily missable in the other location, in a totally optional location. Directly related to death, it's such an impressive looking model. I can't stop thinking about it, and it happened when I first started playing the game. I just thought about it for days because also there was no information on the internet. There was no wiki, people were just only getting into it, and I saw this I think on my second day of playing the game. It was incredible. I still think about it. Well, Godwyn, directly related to death, which has by now become the main topic of this video. If someday, somehow, we get an Elden Ring DLC, I hope we see more of Godwyn and the origins to his corrupted body. It is a very long shot, but hey, if the Old Hunters DLC for Bloodborne showed us cause, anything can happen in Elden Ring. Then let this be the end of this video. Death was the first main focus of this video series, and on the next one I want to focus a bit more on the otherworldly threats in Elden Ring. Its outer gods, especially the Frenzied Flame, seems so interesting to me, and I would love to have a discourse around that. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings about this particular topic. Death has always been a particularly interesting topic for me, and to see it being used in Elden Ring in such a subtle but brilliant way has piqued my interest greatly. Elden Ring in its essence deals with the macabre and does it in the best way possible. It's sentimental, subtle, and highly philosophical. It's existential horror, maybe the best kind of horror out there. For my next video, I'm thinking about talking about the horror of Death Stranding and take a short break from Elden Ring. But if this video does well enough, I will then change my schedule and make the next Elden Ring video focused on Outer Gods instead. We'll see what happens. As always, thank you all for watching. You can find all my links in the description below. I have Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and there's also a pretty nice Discord server with nearly 3,000 members. It's a chill, inclusive, safe space. Feel free to join and lurk around. As always, again, thank you for watching, and please make sure to subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it, by the way, all that jazz. Well, that's it from me. I'll see you on the next one.